coming up next is, let's put some highlight on technology presentation, a platform approach for securing your digital journey. And to put some light, we have Anita Shreyaker coming up on stage. Anita Shreyaker is Head BFSI, India and SAARC, Fortinet. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Anita is a seasoned professional with a demonstrated history of working in information technology and service industry, managing the BFSI domain. She has proven the expertise and have been recognized for building trust with clients and aiding them on their digital transformation journeys. This has not only helped many employees establish their brands in enterprise market, but also helped them become one of the leading players in cybersecurity domain. Can we have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Anita Shreyaker?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I know I'm there in front, just in middle of, very close to your lunch, but I will primarily take just couple of minutes. So thank you so much. Thank you, Elets, for giving me that opportunity, and from Fortinet. So I'm here to present, okay, the platform approach for securing your digital journey that is really relevant for the businesses today, okay? So just to give you an overlook through the agenda, we are primarily going to see through your eyes, and we are trying to align on the same direction that you're seeing through by giving you a closer look at what is the cybersecurity mesh architecture. And if the time permits, we will primarily look into some Q&A sessions. And at the right-hand side where you're primarily seeing is the robot, but that is primarily signifying us because we are trying to gather more of market intelligence from learned people like you and trying to build actually the threat intelligence on top of it. So seeing the world through your eyes, this is primarily one of the major concerns that goes at the back of every CXOs, okay? And that is where I just wanted to emphasize more is basically these few trends. One is digital acceleration. I mean, with the recent current trends, right from UPI transactions up to CBDC, okay, we are seeing that security is becoming a mainstream. Secondly, work from anywhere. We all know that remote working is here to stay. And there also, we are looking at explosion of so many attack surfaces that is basically diversifying. And that is where hybrid working requires to be rethinked. Similarly, we are talking about application journey. We know that most of the organizations from the FSI industry are moving towards multi-cloud strategy. And that is where these solutions are primarily used to see that they actually come up with most of these services and primarily also as a part of the scalability model and also with respect to business continuity. So it basically becomes very, very inherent and important for most of the CISOs to relook and rethink the network security architecture. I'm so sorry. Rethink the network security architecture to ensure that they basically deliver digital experience to the users across the entire application landscape. And more important is the evolving threat landscape. We are seeing that there are so many cyber attacks that are happening, and that is primarily which they are trying to target because they are very sophisticated, relentless, and which primarily, I could see that what Gartner also talks about, 67% of most of the organizations are primarily being targeted either by a ransomware attack or primarily a state-sponsored attack, okay? And very, very important is the regulatory compliance. So this is primarily pushing every FSI industry to see that they comply to the cybersecurity framework and also to comply to most of the guidelines that every FSI industry is going through. You beat the certain guidelines, you look at the master payment control systems, master direction for payment controls, payment settlements. So all these, compliance and stringent guidelines where most of the FSI industry is looking at. And that is where actually security plays a very, very important role. Okay, so I just wanted to bring in two things that is basically driving this. One is primarily the infrastructure evolution, And second, which we spoke about, in terms of the evolving threat landscape. So primarily, we spoke about work from anywhere, where basically users, remote users, users have to connect from any remote locations. They basically need to have access applications, whether applications moving from the data center to the cloud, or sometimes back to the data center, or probably at the edge. And very important, you need to also look at how are these OT devices are very converged and talking to their business systems. And similarly, with the kind of evolving threat landscape which we already covered, the cyber securities are basically trying to adopt these advanced persistent threats. Primarily, they are trying to adopt these tactics so that they actually target it much faster. So there are certain things which basically comes into the mind. It's primarily, that this is slowing down the digital initiatives, because we are talking to a couple of customers, and what are they citing is, where since applications are across different estates, okay, whether applications are on SaaS or whether on cloud or whether it resides in the data center, similarly, users are also working from anywhere. So whether they are working from any location, remote location or branch, or either from home, we are seeing that there are so many devices and solutions which comes up. So there are a lot of FSI industries which are talking about, okay, if I have to look at an endpoint security, I'm going to invest on one solution. If I'm talking about application security, because that is something, a stringent guideline, which is regulated by RBI or a SEBI or IRDI, okay? So every time there are solutions which is primarily where most of the customers are looking at, but what is there that we are going to look at is, Gartner is talking about the cybersecurity mesh architecture, and this is something which we wanted to emphasize on, because with every problem, most of the FSIs are looking at for a solution. But what is primarily happening that you are talking about 30 to 40 solutions that actually works in silos. And what is the proposition that Fortinet brings in is primarily we are talking about convergence and consolidation, where we are talking about converging all these solutions and primarily offering this as a platform. Rather than looking at solutions which are not going to talk to each other, we are talking about a converged platform. And that completely resonates as a part of our vision, which is primarily convergence and consolidation. And that also resonates with the today's discussion that we are talking about over here. Now, very important what Fortinet brings in. Fortinet brings in, three key areas that primarily most of the organizations are looking at, and that is where we address. The first is convergence of networking and security, because we have seen that, that since Fortinet has evolved since past 22 years, and they're born on the same concept where we have been serving customers primarily for their firewall, but we are also extending into areas of transforming the WAN, which is the SD-WAN. We are talking about the zero trust network. We are talking about the network access control. So these are the solution areas which we are trying to address. Similarly, what we are doing is we are talking about the platform, because we are talking about converging all these solutions as a platform approach, so that we talk about endpoint talking to cloud, or probably a NOC talking to a SOC. So we are talking about convergence as a platform. And very important is the third thing, which is threat intelligence. Because we are talking about convergence, we ensure that the latest and the recent updates are applied to all the solutions that is available. And that is also delivered through as a part of the offerings, whether it could be an appliance-based, or whether it could be a SaaS-based offerings, or whether it could be an container-based offerings. Now, very important, which we are primarily seeing. So this is basically what it looks like. So when we are looking at convergence, when we are looking at platform, and when we are looking at threat intelligence, that forms a security fabric. Fortinet is committed to offer these solutions with the broadest of the portfolio that we have, which are completely integrated together and primarily completely automated to actually give you efficient operations. And that is where we speak about, because we are not only talking about converging different solutions, but we also are building upon an open ecosystem primarily to look at maximizing your investments. When I mean open ecosystem, is basically we are talking about, how are we going to bring down the entire investments by offering, solutions around, your current environment, which is basically extended ecosystem which we are providing it to most of the customers. So you basically actually also have different fabric connectors. We are also talking about fintechs who are collaborating with most of the FSI industry, and that is where we are talking about API connectors which talks to cloud and other cloud service providers. So we are basically integrating almost 500 plus security solutions and also, connectors which we are talking, and we are primarily heterogeneous. So this is a part of, I may not get into more detail, but this is an entire security fabric expansion which we are primarily trying to address right from the user to having any application access on the cloud. So we are talking about entities anywhere and available resources everywhere. So this is something which I had just wanted to talk about. And more important, let's look more detail into a closer look at the cybersecurity mesh. So primarily what I would do is I will just try to pick up 2 use cases and try to see that how we could look at addressing this. Now, very important, we are talking about the cybersecurity mesh. So digital acceleration is becoming very, very important for most of the banks. And similarly, work from anywhere is also there. So we have seen a lot of banking customers are looking at transforming the WAN. There is a traditional approach where they could look at is one, either look at adopting SD-WAN, okay? And similarly, there are 2 parameters to look at. First parameter is primarily how are the users connecting to the branch? I mean, how is the branch connecting to the network? And second parameter is primarily how is the user going to access those applications from the branch? So the traditional approach would probably be of adopting an SD-WAN, but Fortinet's approach is totally different. We are talking about secure SD-WAN. So what are you talking about? Secure is primarily we are embedding security as a part of a solution. Not only that, we need to also look at how it is going to really orchestrate your existing network, and that is the reason Fortinet also has a central control which primarily controls the entire access points, as well as it also controls the switches. Now similarly, I look at the other parameter, which is primarily when the user has to access applications. So what probably would you need to do is, I mean, obviously security plays a very, very important role. So, so we need to ensure that the same security policies is applied when he is actually working from home. And at that particular time, the SASE network plays a very, very important role. The SASE cloud plays a very, very important role. So what does it do? It basically shares the same policies which is available on the SASE cloud, and primarily he can actually go and access the internet. I'm so sorry. Now what happens if the user actually want to access these applications back from the data center? Probably there would be certain OEMs who would want to actually invest on a different zero trust network architecture. But here, with Fortinet, with your current existing devices, which can actually act as a reverse proxy for the users to actually connect back to the data center and access applications. So primarily, this brings down your investment in such a way that you do not have to invest on any additional infrastructure to build up this particular framework, and thereby you don't even have to compromise on any such performance. Similarly, it becomes very important when the users want to access this SASE cloud. So you need to ensure that the authentication is applied, because the same credentials need to be used. And that is where our authenticator solution plays a very, very important role. Similarly, when you want to look at accessing the SaaS applications, primarily what would happen is he would probably look at a cloud access security broker. Then you are looking at, Okay, so when you're looking, when you want to really have the history of all these, you will have the CASB here. When you want to see user experience becomes very, very critical. You also need to understand whether the performance, the kind of performance challenges that the user is facing, primarily you may not know. And that is where we have solution around the FortiMonitor, which is primarily managing all the links and giving you a complete visibility. And not only that, Yeah, not only that, but primarily when you really have to interact in such a way that in case if there's any kind of incident logging, you need to understand that whether you need to take any automated response. Okay, so that is where FortiSOAR, which is the solution offering from Fortinet, can definitely help. So what basically I want to represent is that how it has actually created a complete mesh here, okay? Because to actually address the problem of digital acceleration and work from anywhere, you have so many solutions to be built up. And that is where Fortinet can play a very, very important role here. And this is what Gartner talks about. It's talking about the cybersecurity mesh architecture. I will take another example, which is another use case that is primarily on the application security. Here we could really look at 3 vectors here. One obviously is the user. Second is the security control itself, and third is primarily the web application itself. Okay, I just want to understand, just taking a pause over here, I just want to know that is your WAF, traditional WAF, really ready enough? I'm sure, because what is there is that the current traditional WAF does not, which is primarily the generation 1. I mean, these are the these are the capabilities that basically the generation 1 WAF does it. But Fortinet is one of the vendor who basically also addresses the other capabilities, which is primarily on the mobile SDK. So it becomes very, very important and crucial that besides the threat that you would want to see on the WAF front, but you also want to see that how are you going to really take the user side threats into consideration. So there are 2 approaches that you could look at. Primarily what you would do is you wanted to understand that if all these capabilities are available as a part of your WAF, which is already there in place. Otherwise, they would be in such a way that you probably would need to authenticate in such a way, but if that authentication is required at the WAF side or whether it is required at the backend side. Similarly, if you really want to look at file uploads, you need to have a 0-day malwares to be done, screening has to be done. You also need to look at, so when I'm talking about the third vector, because now a lot of applications have moved from a monolithic to a serverless, a container-based application. So it becomes very, very important for you to look at how these applications are built. Okay, so you can actually configure that using a FortiCNP, and you can actually do a lot of CI/CD development using a FortiDevSec. Similarly, when you're looking at going through serverless, you will actually want to consider how am I going to deploy the WAF. Similarly, when you're looking at to understand that how is your WAF really configured, you can actually look at using the penetration testing. Similarly, when you're looking at any kind of compliance logging, you use the FortiSIM. And also, when you're looking at, any kind of automated response which is required to be done, you look at FortiSOAR. And very important, which is primarily one of the stringent regulatory guidelines that has come up from RBI is about the dark web monitoring. I mean, this plays a very, very important role because it's the brand image of the FSI industry that gets compromised. So FortiRecon can actually do that for you, okay? So what I want to again say you is, just to address this particular use case of application security, you're seeing that an entire mesh is getting formed, okay? And that is where I want to end up my session. Believe it or not, the mesh is approaching you. And Fortinet is one of the trusted vendor who can actually help you to build up this cybersecurity mesh architecture. If there are any questions, and if time is really permitting, though it's time's up, but I could really want to take any questions, or probably I'm there around. If there are any questions, we can definitely take it up. Thank you.